Welcome to the Pocket. My name is Scooter, here to give you my Week 10 preview video for the Giants matchup in Munich, Germany against the 2-7 Carolina Panthers. Don't forget to leave a like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so that you don't miss more of my content for the rest of the season. And before I get into the game breakdown, I'm just going to lead off with the inevitable and the obvious. This game has serious draft implications. You look at the bottom seven teams in the draft order this NFL season so far. They are all tied with a 2-7 record. Now, how they deal with this is they sort based on strength of schedule, right? What are the teams that you've played against and what is their record? And you tally all that up and you get your strength of schedule. So at the bottom of that list with the number one overall pick currently is the New England Patriots at 2-7 with the weakest strength of schedule. I think they're a little bit better than I thought they were. Obviously, I didn't think they would win, I think, more than one game this year. But they've impressed me. Drake May looks a lot more comfortable than I anticipated, and just the team overall has shown that they've got some juice, they got some energy. You saw that play Drake May made to tie up the game against the Titans and send it to overtime. It was incredible. The way he scrambled around and found, I believe it was Ramondre Stevenson in the scramble drill. It was just insane. So I think they might win one or two more games throughout the rest of the season. And same thing with the Jags. Obviously, they don't have a brand new quarterback, and they're likely going to fire Doug Peterson, but they've got a talented offense. Brian Thomas Jr. is a great wide receiver. Trevor Lawrence, he's got his issues, but I think he's a pretty talented quarterback, and he'll have a good game or two. Also, could finish with 4 wins. And the Saints, they just got Derek Carr back. Obviously, they just fired Dennis Allen, but in the end of the day, I think they're working with more on offense and defense. I know they just traded away Marshawn Lattimore, and the Giants will play the New Orleans Saints later on this year. So that will be another game with serious draft implications. Then you got the Panthers. Obviously, this is one of those games that is going to have implications. They look like the genuine worst team in the NFL. They had to move back to Bryce Young, but they did pull off a win against the Saints last week. I guess it's not saying much based on how the Saints have been playing ever since they've suffered injuries. But yeah, I would say they're probably the actual worst team in the NFL. And then you have the Cleveland Browns at 2-7. Now I know they looked really bad last week, but they did beat the Ravens. I think with Jameis, this is just what you have to expect. Is 1 week they're going to look like a bottom five team, and then the next they're going to look like a top 15 team. So I think they're going to win. Maybe probably. I think they're most likely actually to rise out of this bottom seven. And then you have the Raiders. Um, Now they could be like the Panthers, one of the bottom two or three teams in the league. They did lose to the Panthers, but they tend to pull off some upsets. I mean, they beat the Chiefs last year with Aiden O'Connell. Antonio Pierce has them playing hard, and in the end of the day, I think maybe one, two more wins for them the rest of the year. And then you got the Giants. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants, after losing this game, managed not to win another single game for the rest of the year. The rest of their schedule maybe only has two or three winnable games, not even three. I would say just the Cowboys without Dak and the Saints with the way that they've been playing recently. So I foresee maybe, and then you got this Panthers game, right? So that would be the third. But so that's your winnable games for the Giants. I think most likely to rise out of it is Cleveland, the Jaguars, and the Saints. But then you look at, say, I would project the Patriots, Panthers, Raiders, and then the Giants is kind of your wild card. Not really sure what's going to happen. Last year, we were looking really bad, and then we managed to finish with 6 wins, and that landed us at 6. So that's, the draft order and the way it's looking right now. And it's a battle to see who's going to get their choice of, say, Shador Sanders or Cam Ward, maybe you're a Carson Beck guy. Some of the other quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe, the athlete out of Alabama, he looks pretty good. And then Quinn Ewers, the Texas quarterback. So there's a couple guys, right? But this isn't last year's draft class. So I would say having your choice this year is definitely more important than it was last year. So that's the draft situation and that's the implications in this game. But we're going to move on to injuries. There's a lot of people for both teams that are, either questionable or their status is unknown. But I'm just going to give you mostly the key injuries for each team. For the Giants, it's going to be Darius Slayton. He's out with a concussion. He's been our number 2 wide receiver all year. And when Malik Neighbors was out, he stepped up. So not having him is going to be challenging. But this will open the door for Jalen Hyatt to potentially prove himself as a well-rounded wide receiver that can at least well do the outside perimeter stuff, right? He's probably not going to ever be good inside as like, someone who can just make quick separation and be a sure-handed guy. But if he can just be a deep threat that'll draw enough attention from the safety away from Malik Neighbors, that's all we need from him in this game. Moving on, Jason Pinnock is questionable with an injury to his abdomen. He's our starting safety. We do have Dane Belton, though, so if he does not end up playing, it's going to hurt a little bit, but we do have a replacement who's actually gotten in there this year. So there's that. And then Theo Johnson's status is unknown. He's got a knee. Hopefully he ends up playing because he's been looking pretty good recently. And then Greg Van Roten with a shoulder. Once again, his status is unknown. But shoulder for an offensive lineman, that's not ideal. And then Dexter Lawrence, he's having another rest day. And then Chris Hubbard had an illness. So I think in the end of the day for the Giants, obviously Slayton's the biggest hit. If Van Roten doesn't play, that's going to be a problem. I think everybody else I mentioned is either going to play or it's just not too consequential. Moving on to the Panthers, Ike Ekwonu, the same guy they drafted in the draft class that we took, Evan Neal, is not going to play. He's one of their higher upside linemen, one of their younger guys who they're trying to develop, but he's not going to play in this game. Also not going to play Adam Thielen. I believe he's been out for a while, and he's very old, so even if he was going to play coming off an injury, I don't think he'd be too much of a headache for us. Tommy Tremble, I know they drafted Jatavion Sanders, but he's been their starting tight end for a couple years, and he's not too bad, but he's questionable with a back, so that's a tricky injury to work your way around. Jadeveon Clowney, the veteran pass rusher, he had a rest day, but he's questionable, so that's a little interesting. And then J.C. Horn, their young, well, he's not young anymore, but he's one of their core pieces per se on their defense. His status is unknown. He had a rest day, and then all the rest is just unknown statuses of guys I personally don't recognize. So no offense to them if you're on the injury report and I didn't mention you, I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to get the key ones out there. So in the end of the day, I think the Giants and the Panthers are missing a key offensive player. For the Panthers, it's Icky. For the Giants, it's going to be Slayton. But all the rest, I think both teams can manage to work with. Now, we're going to move on to the team stats of each team, kind of set the stage for the offensive unit and the defensive unit for each team and try to identify what is the most elite unit between these two teams. What is the best unit that is probably going to be advantageous for one team to win this game? Looking at the offense, the Giants actually have managed to score less points per game than even this bad Panthers team. 15.4 versus them having 16.3. Not ideal. Big reason for that is the Panthers have been pretty good at running the ball this year with Chuba Hubbard. And even though they've struggled very mightily over the past 2 seasons, when it comes to passing the ball, the Giants have still let up more sacks. So I think that's a big reason they're allowing themselves to run the balls because they're not getting in quite as many, say, second and long, third and long situations. Now, the Giants do have better time of possession, so they do have that going for them. The Panthers are bottom 3 in time of possession. They cannot sustain drives. And then when you compare the passing offense, the Giants are a little bit better. We have 30 more yards per game. Obviously, we haven't scored quite as many touchdowns just in totality, but that kind of goes into the sustaining drives thing, like how many yards are you getting per game from that unit. And then the Giants also have a more consistent run game. I've mentioned that they effectively have run the ball with Chuba, but that's from more of a production and touchdown standpoint. The Giants have averaged about 14 more yards per game for whatever that's worth. And we have about the same yards per carry, 4.3 and 4.4. So I would say overall, the offenses are very comparable. They've got trouble at quarterback, trouble in the offensive line, can't really consistently put drives together and score or convert in the red zone. I would say the Giants are better at moving the ball, but the Panthers are better at converting touchdowns. So take that for what it's worth. It's going to probably have a big tell when we talk about the defense about what's going to happen in this game. Now, For the defense, the Panthers have the worst defense in the league when it comes to points per game allowed, 32.6. That's 4 points more than the Dallas Cowboys, who are in second worst in that position. Now, the Giants' defense points per game is actually average, 22.4. And a big reason for that is that our pass defense is quite good while our run defense is quite bad. So that lands us right in the middle. The Panthers, now they have the worst run defense in the league, but something I want to point out is their yards per carry allowed is only 4.6. The Giants lead the NFL in yards per carry allowed at 5.2. So even though we've been more competitive, when teams are able to run on us, they run on us often and effectively. So I believe more teams have run the ball like overall against the Panthers. That's why they have more yards per game allowed. But when it comes to the actual effectiveness of their run defense, I think it might even be a little bit better than the Giants. Now, when you look at the pass defense, Giants are middle of the pack in yards allowed, and a big reason for that is if we don't get a sack, we're probably going to let up a big third down conversion, and kind of playing that off bend don't break defense. We've been allowing teams to get to the red zone and then stopping them from scoring. Now, the Panthers are the worst pass defense in the league when it comes to yards allowed. 392 yards allowed per game. Very bad. And then you look at sacks, and they're bottom 10 or bottom 2, excuse me, with 10 sacks, tied for second worst. So the takeaway from this is the Panthers defense is not good at anything. They can't stop the run, whether that's game script or not, and they can't sack the quarterback. They can't stop teams from moving the ball. And the Giants defense can at least do one of those things. So that's the team stats breakdown. I think that paints a really good picture. At this point in week 10, you've got a good sample of what each team has done so far this season. And I think at that point, you can start looking at the team stats and not the player stats, or, kind of looking at one game in particular. So the Vegas projection, the Giants are projected to win. They are 6.5-point favorites. And the total is 40.5. So that would project the Giants win of 24-17. This kind of implies that the Panthers managed to take advantage of some of the Giants' defensive struggles, and they will score 17 points. So I would say, they do get down the field, right? The Giants do the bend, don't break thing. And, a couple of the drives we hold them to we hold them to one field goal. A couple of the drives we stop them from getting into field goal range. And then two of those drives, they go all the way and they score 2 touchdowns, right? And they convert. Probably at the end of half, right? Because that's just when it seems to happen for us. But then for the Giants, it implies that our offense, even though it's not that good, and this is a defense that's been allowing 32 points per game, we're not going to do quite that well, but we are going to be able to do something. So it's basically a 10-point over projection of what our offense has been averaging. And I guess that sort of cancels out directly almost with the points per game that they've allowed is 32. We've averaged 15. And they said, you know what? We're going to put them at 24. Did the same thing for the Panthers offense. I suppose that is probably how they come up with these projections, right? I'm sure there is a little bit of, they look at certain matchups, is their secondary too much of a liability? And, the Giants receiving core is like good enough to take advantage of it. I'm sure they do stuff like that, but I would say in the most part, it's kind of looking at the average points per game, strength of schedule, and things like that. But anyway, so that's the Vegas projection. And what do I think about that? Well, I think this game's going to go one of two ways. I think the first scenario is this game is close, right? Early, nobody's really scoring. Or, the teams both score a touchdown, but then things sort of stall and things are starting to get a little ugly. So if the Panthers are tied or they get up early and the Giants offense is struggling to expose this Panthers defense, I think the Panthers are going to start running the ball. They're going to start chewing up the clock, keeping it away from our offense, protecting themselves from their own defense. The Giants could have a critical turnover in this situation, and I think that would result in the Giants' loss of 20-14. Maybe it would be a little bit higher scoring, but I don't think our defense is going to be that bad if we lose this game. Now, the other scenario is the game is still close, but the Giants get up early, right? If we're winning by the second quarter or by halftime, we're going to have that game script that I was talking about in the last video where our defense can just tee off. We're leading the league in sacks. That's the one thing we've been really, really good at this year. And this is one of those teams where they've got a bad offensive line. The game script could be in our favor. So it would make sense that we would have one of those 6-8 sacks games, 6 to 8 sack games. So the Panthers Offense, like I said, is going to struggle due to the game script, and the Giants' offense isn't great, but this Panthers defense is so bad that they will manage to score points. In this scenario, I think the Giants would win 27-14. What do I think is going to happen? That's what I think is going to happen. I think even though the Giants have been pretty bad, we've had 2 blowout losses so far. We've got blown out by the Eagles, who run the ball and are really good in the red zone, which is what we're supposed to be good at. So it's kind of a hard counter. And then the Vikings, week 1, really caught us by surprise. And it was kind of a similar situation. They were able to run the ball, use extensions of the run game, throwing to the flat, taking advantage of us playing off, and they were able to score. We had a pick 6, so it was 21 points by their offense, but that was enough. So, in the end of the day, every other game we played, we've been competitive in. We've lost by a score, just one score. I know in the Bengals game it was 10 points, but that game was close until the very end. And I think that's pretty telling. The Panthers have gotten, beaten pretty handily in most of the games that they've lost this year. They haven't really played close. And I think this is going to be the game where people realize that, okay, the Giants aren't a good football team overall, but they do have an elite unit that if they play a bad team or a team that has that weakness, that corresponding weakness, they will take advantage and win that game. That is how upsets happen. Now the Giants are favored, and rightfully so, I believe. We have the most powerful unit in this football game in our pass rush. And there's nothing else really on, the Panthers defense or the Panthers offense that is too much for any team to handle. The Giants offense isn't too much for any team to handle, not even close. It's the worst in points per game that they scored. But as I said, if you're getting sacked 8 times, Giants offense is going to have plenty of opportunities to score. They're going to have short fields. There might be a turnover. Their offense isn't going to have time of possession chewing up the clock, so you'll have plenty of time to score and plenty of time to take away from them. And I just personally foresee that being how it plays out. So the result of this would actually be Giants spread minus 6.5, and then that would be just over the total of 40.5 at 41 points. So you heard it here first. Giants minus 6.5 over the point total and Giants money line, right? So you could talk about the draft order and the implications here, but I think this is, a game that if you lose this game, sure, you might end up with the first overall pick or, a top 3 pick, but how great are you really feeling about the team if you go from being competitive in the first half of the year to losing to the Panthers, right? And then maybe losing to the Saints. I just don't see that happening with this coaching staff, with this team. They're too competitive in every game to lose this one. So that is all for my preview of the Germany-Munich game matchup between Bryce Young and Daniel Jones, the 2-7 Panthers and Giants. Obviously, this game, a lot of people are looking at it as a joke, but it's pretty serious for Giants and Panthers fans, right? It's, as I stated, it's going to have a lot of there's going to be a big domino effect based off of this game. So don't forget to like and leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss more of my content this year. It's getting to be a pretty rough time in the year. You're talking about the draft. As being a Giants fan, people are always telling you, oh, you'll be thinking about the draft by November. Well, I hate to say it, but, we're kind of forced to think about it. But I want us to win, and that's going to be all for this one. See you in the next one. Peace out.